Alright, YouTube, it's time to talk about how the populists, nativists, nationalist light movement in Europe has already won, and you simply don't see it yet. You're still worried, but here's the thing. The corporate media and the state media and the establishment movements in Europe are also worried, and that's the key. You have every right to be worried because for decades and decades, if you're a European, you've been essentially told that your choice boils down to fake conservative parties that will lower taxes a little bit and have foreign loyalties in a fiscal sense to a bunch of multinational banks, multinational corporations, foreign entities, especially Saudi Arabia and some of these others, I mean the Chinese or Russians. Or you've had to vote for leftist parties, usually outright socialism, sometimes center leftism, doesn't really matter, that have the same foreign loyalties, but they apply it more to a social sense. That's what you've been told for a long time in Europe. That's what we were told here. Yo, you can choose between the neoconservative movement of the Republican Party. They're going to sell you out to multinational corporations. They're going to start wars on behalf of other states. They're also going to start wars on behalf of those same corporations. They're not going to do anything about multinational banks fucking around with our economy. They're not going to do anything about social alienation. By the way, they're all gated community dwellers. They don't really care about the poor in this country, and the few members of the party that do care about you are toothless. Or you can vote for the neoliberal party, the Democratic Party. They're going to do the same thing, but they're going to slap a smiley face on it, pretend to care about minorities while screwing them. That's the choice that we have fundamentally had for several decades in this country. It's the same thing in Europe. All these other parties, oh, but we have more parties than in the United States. We don't just have a two-party system. We have the Green Party, and we have the Communist Party, and we have National Party for Bakers Association and stuff like. Doesn't matter. None of those parties have any power. The coalitions that form, they always revolve around those same centrist, neoliberal, and neoconservative movements now, don't they? You're in the same boat that we are. It doesn't matter whether it's a two-party system or a 20-party system. Most of them are so totally fringe and they oppose one another on so many wedge issues, there's no way they can form a ruling coalition where coalitions form at all. Outside of that, it doesn't matter. The neoconservatives or neoliberals are still going to hold power, whether it's singular power, coalition power, whatever your voting system happens to be. And you've got a lot of weird voting systems over there in Europe. Now I think I know why you like soccer instead of American football, let's face it. But here's the thing. Until recently, the corporate media and the state parties of Europe have never really lost sleep over the idea of populism gaining any significant traction. Yeah, it's a fringe movement. It's like the Green Party. Or it's like, this other fringe party over here. It's like, in the Netherlands, they have like a dedicated elderly people party, apparently. They also have DENK, which is like the Turkish party, and they want to basically turn the Netherlands into Turkey 2.0 or something. They've actually got a little bit of representation that is quasi-legal, I guess, or something like that. So they never cared before. They looked at these fringe movements within larger parties, or they looked at the smaller parties, and they said, who cares? We're not even going to bother talking about them, because it's worthless to bother. It's a non-issue. It's never going to happen. Now they're worried. Nigel Farage put it quite succinctly, oh, you're not laughing now, are you? I think that was sort of the bellwether of things to come. The fact is that a decade ago, probably nobody there expected there to ever be the possibility of a Brexit. Maybe 1% of the population will support it, some pensioners over there and this group of skinhead punks or something. That's your Brexiters. They never expected middle England, small town, pre-industrial now England, with its rotting out factories, would ever vote in favor of such a thing. Let alone the fact that a lot of the Welsh voted for it. They never expected that. Do you think they expected that Front National, that they would even have to imagine a scenario in which Marine Le Pen could win the election there? Do you think they ever imagined that there was even a scenario in which Wilders, or Wilders, whichever you pronounce it as, I'm not Dutch, so, don't expect my pronunciation to be perfect, please. Do you think that they ever expected half a decade ago that something like that would happen? That they would actually have to address the possibility of a so-called fringe party actually winning an election? That Euroscepticism would be a mainstream movement? No, they never expected it. If you had told somebody half a decade ago here in the United States, oh, the next president is going to run on a populist platform, from within the Republican Party after constantly insulting his opponents, completely lambasting the very political process in which he's taking part in, do you think anybody would have believed you? Oh, by the way, it's going to be Donald Trump. Nobody would have believed you. They would have called you nuts. They would have dragged you off to the funny farm. The mere fact that they have to discuss these things bothers them. They're terrified. Multinational banks in the Western world are terrified. Neoconservative and neoliberal political establishments are terrified. All of their corporate buddies are terrified. They're all pulling together. There's a reason why you have media left, right, and center opposing the same people in all of these places. There's a reason why supposedly far-right and supposedly far-left movements often find themselves in agreement that they have to suppress some other movement. There's a reason that they're attempting to use censorship, which is never popular. Whenever censorship and suppression are applied within a population, it typically makes that fringe movement, even if it shoves it underground, it gets bigger. It's a desperate measure for them to do these sorts of things. When they say, oh, well, Wilders, we're going to, censure him because he said something about Somalians. Marine Le Pen, oh, she said something about immigration. We're going to strip her of immunity. Oh, Donald Trump said this and that. We're going to take the nuclear football from him, they're saying now. We're going to impeach Donald Trump. They're terrified. They're horrified at what's going on. They think their toys are going to be broken. The thing is, all these people, these very wealthy individuals, whether they were born into wealth usually or whether they rose up into extravagant wealth, are fighting on the same side. It doesn't really matter. These centrist parties in Europe and the United States have the same views. So unless you have a situation in which one of those large parties is usurped and overthrown by elements from within, as what happened here in the United States, unless that happens, you get other parties rising. Le Pen and Front National were a mere blinking out light, a mere afterthought in French politics until very recently. Wilders and his people have risen up to incredible degrees. So has Front National. So has UKIP. UKIP did far better the last time around. The Brexit occurred. Nigel Farage got very, very drunk and was very, very happy. Populism, nationalism, nativism, they're rising all across Europe. We look at what's happening with the Visegrad Group. You have political movements. You have Front National saying, oh yeah, we want to win in France. And if we do, by the way, we're going to partner with the Polish and the Hungarians and all these groups that are more Eurosceptic, that are tired of this crap coming from Merkel. We're going to help them leave too. We're going to prop them up. We're going to form our own coalition. Europe is fracturing into major blocks, which is what some forthright people anticipated and predicted would happen over a decade ago, honestly. They looked at what happened in Greece, especially a few years ago, and what was happening in Spain and Italy. They said, well, the fiscal side's not working. And then they took one look at the immigrant crisis. They said, oh yeah, this is going to be pretty good for the so-called far right. These parties, in many cases, they're not even far right. You think UKIP is a far-right party? Front National is a far-right party? They're not far-right, they just want to preserve their culture. Now, you can argue that that's morally wrong, that there's something evil about people who favor the native population, who are literal nativists. You can make that argument in your subjective sense, there's no problem with that, but they're still rising up, they're still gaining dominance. And by the way, if Le Pen loses this time around, and there's a pretty good chance she does, her odds of winning, they are there. She can. It's not clear, though, that she's going to. If she loses, she's going to come back more powerful than ever the next time around, and she'll win then. The rate of growth, even if it slows significantly, she'd still be over that threshold the next time around. Front National will seize control of France. Wilders. He has an even lower chance of winning this time around. I think it's literally tomorrow that they hold their vote. Because even if he gains that majority, he can't govern. He can't apparently formulate a coalition unless he gets literally like the Green Party on board there with what he wants to do. So he's not going to have any actual power. But the next time around he might. Because the Netherlands and France, what's causing these parties to rise is an ongoing process that people like Merkel want to double down on. It's happening here too. People who think, oh, Trump's populism is dying. The same media that declared his candidacy dead during the primaries, that declared his candidacy dead during the general election multiple times, that declared that he was a lame duck as soon as he took office when he was first there. He would never do anything. There would be no wall. There'd be no tax cuts. There'd be no change to bureaucracy. He'll probably get kicked out. They're now declaring that populism, not just Trump's presidency, but populism itself is dead. It'll never return. Haha, the left wins again. You're so totally wrong. Because the constant shift that is leading to the growth of these movements is continuing. They will get more powerful until a reversal point is reached, and then those programs, those systems, will be done away with. And you're infecting the next generation unwittingly because you think you're doing the right thing. I speak here to the leftists. You think that you're going to prevent the next generation from being conservative or populist or libertarian or whatever. Bullcrap. It's already happening. You've already lost. You've lost an entire generation because you devolved. You got so complacent in your neoliberalism and neoconservatism. This goes out to the neocon Republicans too, people like John McCain. You got so complacent that you thought you could keep robbing people blind, passing crappy trade deals, screwing around with your stupid wars, and that it wouldn't piss people off. Don't worry, we can control the situation. No, you can't. You've got social media to contend with. You can't control it at all. You no longer have a captive audience watching talking heads that are easily bought off with a check. You no longer have that advantage. You're done for as a movement. The paradigm shift has already occurred. Trump won. Other populists and nativists are gaining control of what is becoming the media juggernaut of the new generation. People online. People operating from their bedroom. That's where people get information from. They're not getting it from CNN. CNN cuts its own feed so often that it's outright dystopian. People are beginning to notice that too. And it always seems to happen when something inconvenient to neoliberalism is being said or about to be said. Their satellite feed is very selective in when it decides to get iffy on whether it stays connected or not. Very, very selective. Oh, but it's just a coincidence. They're hemorrhaging so much money they can't even maintain their satellite feed, I guess. At least that's their explanation. I can think of no other than they're cutting it on their own. So yeah, Europe is, New Dawn is approaching in Europe already. You may not see it right now. You think, oh, Le Pen will lose. She won't actually, the globalists will maintain control of France. Oh, they're going to maintain control of the Netherlands. We'll never get this chance again. Bullcrap. You're going to get the chance in a few years, and your movements will be more powerful then. You won't even need a coalition, probably. You'll have outright power. The Netherlands and France, yeah, they're going to fall to populism the next time around. The next time there's an election, barring a significant social upheaval within their countries, in which case it's no longer necessary. But what I mean by upheaval is, oh, they've closed their borders anyway, with or without these populists being in control. But what we've seen with people like Merkel is they don't do that. They pretend that they want to do so for election purposes, and then they do the opposite. The second that they're elected, it's back to, oh, we must appease foreign group A and foreign group B. We need to bend over and compromise our own culture on behalf of people who they're not German or they're not Swedish or whatever. You can think that that's superior. I'm not making any objective argument here against the concept of, replacement rate immigration or whatever, because they're all subjective arguments, but you have to witness truth as it really is, and it's based on perception. The political truth is not based on objective truth about money or any of these things. It's based on how people perceive things. Perception is king. The truth stems from perception. The truth people think they're witnessing is all their own opinion. It's how they perceive the world. And what they perceive of, increasingly in Europe, is there's no future for our children. There's barely any future for our pensioners. We have to keep slashing programs for them because we keep paying for people that come here, riot, protest, have no respect for law, have no respect for our culture. That is what they witness. That's what they perceive of. And the European establishment parties don't perceive of it that way because they're out of touch. The same as our establishment here. They live in their upper class communities with their private security. They don't have to worry about finding a regular job. They don't care about middle America. They don't care about the working class. They don't care about minorities any more than they care about the white working class. They don't care. Al Sharpton does not give a crap about the black community. He just wants their money and their votes. He wants to be able to go on a speaking tour, go to Harlem, and net 10 grand in a night by talking to people and pretending that he cares. Obama didn't care about the black community. He sure as hell didn't care about the jobs that were available in this country, as he oversaw the continuation of recession because he refused to let the economy rebalance itself. None of those people care. John McCain doesn't give a fuck about the people of Arizona. He doesn't care if you all die. He'd probably laugh if you did. They don't care about you. You don't have to be you don't have to be a Sieg Heiling alt-righter like they're trying to cast off JonTron now as being alt-right because he happens to support closing the borders down or building a wall or whatever. It's retarded. But you don't have to be alt-right, Nazi or something like that to realize there's a problem going on in the developed world. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine what would happen if it were some other culture that were undergoing such upheaval? Oh yeah. By the way, in 20, 30 years, Bangladesh will be majority Pakistani. How do you think the people there would react? And by the way, I don't see anybody worrying about Modi over there in India saying, yeah, we're going to remain a Hindu nation of people of Indian origin. I don't see these same liberals complaining about that. Why? Is it because it's not in Europe or the Americas? You love Modi. You have no problem with him so long as he doesn't haul off and kill a million people. You don't care what he does. You probably just wish that he'd clean the rivers more and plant more trees and there'd be more environmentally friendly policies in India. That's probably as far as their criticism of Modi goes. And the fact that he's partnered with the Chinese now fiscally through BRICS, oh, they love it even more. They love China. They love Chinese censorship. They don't care that in China they're essentially nationalists too. Crazy nationalists with a mixed model economy and communism in name only. But hey, they're not European, so therefore they're good. They're everything wholesome in the world. That's why they're out of touch. You have the same people, the same so-called liberals, who don't even have anything in common with the original liberal movement of yesteryear, not even with the JFK era liberals, let alone classical liberalism. Have nothing in common with it. They're a bunch of fucking corporate oligarchs and stuff like that. The poor liberals are voting against their own self-interest on a daily basis. These same people that say, oh yeah, the white numbers are declining in the US, it's a great thing, it's wonderful. Would they ever say that about any other group? If someone were to come out and say, oh yeah, but also there will be, as a ratio, because Hispanic immigration is so high and Asian birth rates are now, almost even, the population of black citizens in the United States is actually going to decrease. Do you think that they would celebrate that? Oh yeah, black patriarchy, black, privilege, whatever. No, they're not going to do that. It's because they're brain dead. They just, they hate the reigning culture, and people have declared that the reigning culture happens to be white, which I don't even know quite what they're getting at there. But they hate it. They hate the native culture. They wouldn't care about it. It's like this Steve King says, oh, well, we can't prop up our nation with foreign babies. You do realize that the native babies he's talking about, a lot of them are Hispanic. A lot of them are black. A lot of them are Asian. They're not all white. In fact, the majority at this point in history, as of this year, the majority aren't white. But those are our babies. They're American citizens that he's talking about. They're of all origins. They're Asian. Yes, there are people that are Americans. They're part of the native culture. They happen to be black. They happen to be Asian or Hispanic. Ooh. And this scares some of the more hardline ethno-nationalists at the same time that it apparently escapes the notice of the left. They say, oh, our babies, oh, he's a racist. He's talking about wanting to kill minorities. He's talking about just white people. No, he's not. Not talking just about white people. He's talking about Americans. You're projecting his view of America as being, oh, solely white, only white. It's a projection. You're the ones making that up for political gain, of course. It's manufactured outrage. And there's the other problem. The other problem for the European establishment, the same as it is the establishment here, especially on the liberal side. The main problem is manufactured outrage. This happened among, like, the evangelicals. Evangelism in this country in the 80s, as a satanic panic era into the early 90s, it ended up collapsing, specifically because they branded everything good, wholesome, and enjoyable in the world as a sin. This video game's a sin. Harry Potter's a sin. Pokemon is a sin. Meditating is a sin. Yoga's a sin. Everything's a sin. They overstretched, they cheapened their own message, and they collapsed. And half of them aren't in business anymore. The other half panders to the same aging fringe audience they always have. They're still corporate entities. They still do fine. They still have the limos and the private jets, but they don't reach as many people as they used to, nor do they have even remotely as much political sway as they did even a decade ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. The same is happening with the neoliberal establishment movements. They've overstretched the idea of race and sexism and homophobia and ethnocentrism and all these other buzz terms that they throw around to describe anyone they disagree with. They've so overstretched those terms that they risk imploding their own movement. Because pretty soon, when you brand just about everybody as distasteful because they're somehow either they're sexist, racist, whatever they happen to be, when you lump the majority of people in with these terms, the whole shit show collapses in on itself. You've just declared that the majority is against you, and that majority eventually solidifies, and then they do become against you. They become populists, and nativists, and alt-right, and libertarian, and ANCAPs, and things like that. And they bitterly hate you. And it's much, much more pronounced with the younger generation than it is with mine. My generation's no longer the young one. Yeah, 10 years ago we were. Now we're not. The up-and-coming next wave of adults are way, way more conservative than the millennials will ever be. They're more conservative than the Gen X. They're more conservative than the boomers. Hell, they're probably more conservative than people that were fighting in the First World War. Yeah, there's not going to be another FDR anytime soon, but you'll probably get more Trumps. Let's just put it that way. That same goes for Europe. You got a lost generation over there. That's the same thing. Oh, there's no jobs. You know, we're getting handouts from the state. That's all we can get. You know, why aren't we thinking of our own culture? You got people telling us that we need to send more money to foreign shores. It's not going to work. You're going to lose. Globalism is already failing. It's already withering. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't. You should operate from the premise that it's still strong, so you can denigrate it more easily. Drive up your ambition. Speak out against it. Make videos. Make a TV show. Whatever the hell you have to do to argue against it. That's step number one. But step number two, don't get demoralized, because there's no reason to be demoralized. They're the ones that are demoralized. They didn't even want to have to talk about the possibility that Le Pen would ever win an election in France. They wanted to relegate her to a laughingstock, to ridicule her, to say, oh, this fringe movement, bunch of friggin' loonies. They're never going to hold power. France has changed. Demographics have changed. We're basically an Islamic state now, so yeah, it's not going to win. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some Muslims in France that'll vote for her. That's how far it goes. That's how much the left, the SJWs, including the neocons, which act the same way, bend over backwards whenever these buzz terms are flowing around. Oh, please don't label me a racist. Please don't call me a homophobe. Oh, I'm afraid I'm going to lose the election. Something like that. They all do the same thing. And they've even pissed off immigrants. I've spoken to people. Immigrants in Sweden, people who are like for the first or second generation immigrants. They're not ethnically Swedish. They're like from, Asia or whatever. They don't like what's going on in Sweden either. They're going to become a bunch of Nazis. You're literally, if it continues, if you continue trying to suppress populism, which is relatively mild, simply wants to reform the system you're already using, you will get literal National Socialists rising up in the ranks of power, and you will not be able to stop them. You're going to destabilize their own culture. Likewise, the same dying embers of the left will re-solidify. They'll be smaller, but they'll be more vicious. You'll have actual communism. Actually, the Greens will turn into communists, essentially. It's happened before in history. Look at 1930s era Germany, before the Nazis take over. The former juggernaut parties, the Republicans, the Social Democrats, dwindle. They no longer form a majority. A third of the population are Nazis, a third of the population are communists. The other third is split between a bunch of centrist parties that don't know what they're doing, that nobody takes seriously. And it happened in a single generation. It doesn't take that long. We're still going through our paradigm shift. That's what's happening in Europe. It's what's happening in the United States, and it's going to keep fucking happening. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. That's about all.